always thought the word bestie sounded like a brand of disposable cutlery, plastic, shiny, convenient, and guaranteed to snap the moment you put any pressure on it. And that was exactly how it felt when my so-called best friend began helping with the wedding. Every time she smiled with her orthodontist nightmare teeth and chirped, "Don't worry, babe, I've got this," all I heard was the snap of cheap forks, breaking one after another. At first, I convinced myself it was paranoia, the usual pre-wedding jitters mixed with the toxic cocktail of Pinterest boards and unsolicited advice from distant relatives. She volunteered to oversee everything: cake tasting, seating chart, even the playlist. She was the self-proclaimed general of my bridal army, and I, naive little me, thought delegation was the key to sanity. But delegation only works when the delegate isn't trying to replace your bouquet with a grenade. Her compliments were suspiciously selective. She adored my table runners but loathed my shoes. She loved the scent of roses but hated the diamond on my ring. She squealed over the hairstyle trial but couldn't resist pointing out how my face looked a little puffy, babe, but like in a glamorous way. If you think that's not a real thing, you've never had a friend weaponize wellness. I told myself to breathe, to trust, to float. Brides are supposed to glow, not glare. So I floated like a swan, elegant on the surface, furious paddling underneath, while my bestie braided her rope of helpful sabotage, tying it into a sash and prancing around like the pageant queen of chaos. The first real clue arrived with the wedding favors. She insisted we give out artisanal bitters in tiny glass bottles, so chic, so unique. The way she said unique made me want to check the bottles for fingerprints. She tied every bow herself with religious devotion, hands trembling slightly, too eager. Hands never lie, they whisper. Hers whispered impatience, calculation, hunger. Then came the helpful mistakes. The baker got the wrong delivery address. My seamstress never received a message about rescheduling my final fitting. The florist accidentally ordered the roses half a tone off. And she called it editorial, as if my wedding were a fashion spread in a magazine, and not the one day I was supposed to look like joy itself. None of these mistakes were fatal, but all of them were unsettling, like hearing a lullaby played on a violin that's just a little bit out of tune. I should have snapped then. But brides don't snap, they collect. I became a collector of red flags, lining them up in my mind like prayer candles, waiting for the wind to show me where the fire was. The rehearsal dinner tasting nearly set the house ablaze. She hovered over the sauces as if flavor profiles were a matter of national security. Anyone who speaks about flavor profiles outside a professional kitchen is either opening a restaurant or opening a trapdoor. And the way she looked at the little tasting bottles made me wonder if the word cordial might be related to coroner. She presented me with a tiny gift box for calm, a wellness tincture with a label so vague it might as well have read mystery in a bottle. She winked, the universal signal for ignore this red flag while I embroider it with hearts. I didn't drink it. I barely breathed near it. But I smiled and said, I'll save it for the big day. Which was true in the way a magician's patter is true, half truth, half misdirection. That night, I opened a notebook labeled contingencies. Some women write vows. I write counter-espionage manuals. I sketched a map of her likely routes of attack, the dessert station, the champagne tower, the makeup kit, even the emergency clutch. Anywhere distraction reigned, sabotage could sneak in. She wasn't stupid. She was just predictable. Saboteurs always are. They want the drama of chaos but the certainty of applause. They want to throw a dagger and then smile sweetly when the audience claps. 2 days before the wedding, she staged a crisis at the bakery. A misprinted plaque for the groom's cake with a message that would have embarrassed me so thoroughly I might have cried in front of the buttercream roses. But I was already there, hugging the baker and holding sugar flowers when her call came in. The real message was drawing in script so perfect it could have been tattooed on my forehead. When she arrived, panting from fake urgency, I hugged her and said, "Thank you so much for caring." She blinked at me like a cat caught in a pantry. The morning before the wedding, she brought me a health shot, something green and smug in a bottle that had definitely gone to expensive schools. She said, "Drink up, babe. You'll feel amazing." I said, "Let's split it." She hesitated, said she'd already had one. I pressed. "Then let's both sip, for luck." She smiled around the rim like a wolf drinking tea at a children's party. My lips never touched the glass. My eyes never left hers. When the makeup artist accidentally knocked the bottle over with her brush roll, the liquid splattered across the vanity like swamp juice. The makeup artist apologized, everyone laughed, and my bestie's smile twitched like a puppet string pulled too hard. That night, I slept well for the first time in weeks. Not because I trusted her, but because I knew she trusted herself too much. I woke up the morning before my wedding like a general reviewing her war maps. Forget bouquets and vows. My notebook of contingencies was the real sacred text. Inside, neat sketches and scribbles mapped out every possible arena where sabotage could strike. Some brides dream of flower arrangements. I dreamt of counterintelligence. The first page, food and drink. Obvious target, classic method, too cinematic to resist. If you're going to ruin someone's big day, you poison the cake or spike the champagne. It's Shakespearean. It's operatic. It's also stupidly predictable, which made it perfect because predictable villains are the easiest to trap. I contacted the caterer under the guise of a nervous bride request. Every bottle, every pitcher, every drop of liquid would be handled only by staff sworn into my little circle of suspicion. The bartender, a man with shoulders like Greek columns and a soul as steady as a granite countertop, agreed to watch the champagne like it was the crown jewels. His job, make sure that if sabotage walked in, it walked straight into my net. Next page, beauty and accessories. My bestie had already shown interest in holding my lipstick, my clutch, even my veil. She was like a moth drawn to fabric she hadn't paid for. So I split everything into decoys. The clutch she begged to carry, stuffed with fake cosmetics and a bottle of glitter disguised as setting spray. The real essentials, lip balm, vows, emergency blotting papers, were locked in a planner's pouch, guarded with the ferocity of a TSA agent on overtime. Page 3, symbolic gestures. The toast, the bouquet toss, the cake cutting, high visibility, maximum drama. These were her dream stages. I circled them in red ink and wrote, "Control the spotlight, control the show." That's when the idea of poetic justice clicked into place. If she wanted me to drink from her poison chalice, then maybe, just maybe, she would be the one raising it in triumph. I tested the theory with a rehearsal. Alone in my room, I practiced lifting a champagne flute, smiling graciously, and then redirecting attention. Brides practice vows. I practice stagecraft. Because survival isn't about luck, it's about rehearsing the finale until the villain doesn't realize she's the understudy. Of course, none of this could be obvious. If she smelled even a whiff of suspicion, she might pivot, improvise, choose a different battlefield. Saboteurs thrive on improvisation, but only if they believe they're in control. My job was to hand her the illusion of control like a shiny leash, and then wait until she strangled herself with it. Meanwhile, she buzzed around me like a wasp at a picnic. Sweet on the surface, venom hidden in the stinger. She double-checked seating charts, corrected the planner's spreadsheet, suggested last-minute changes to the flowers. At one point, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't worry, babe, I'll take care of you tomorrow." It was the kind of promise that sounds affectionate but feels like a threat wrapped in silk. I smiled. I said, "I know you will." And in that moment, I think I became dangerous. That evening, she slipped me another gift. A little bottle, amber glass with a ribbon, for nerves. I accepted it with a reverence so convincing it could have won me an Oscar. I tucked it into my clutch. What she didn't know was that clutch was the decoy, stuffed with glitter bombs and stage props. If she wanted me to carry the poison onto the dance floor, I'd let her carry the illusion. Later, in the quiet hours, I tested my tools. The photographer's assistant, who owed me a favor for covering her bar tab once, was equipped with a camera and explicit instructions: photograph everything. Every drink poured, every bottle opened, every suspicious glance. Candids, I called them. Evidence, in reality. Because if my plan worked, the story would write itself in snapshots. The planner helped me with the pièce de résistance, a set of custom cordials made to look like rare boutique spirits. They were harmless, but each bottle had a tamper strip coated with a cosmetic compound. Once someone cracked the seal, the liquid would stain their lips faintly pink, deepening under flash photography. It wasn't deadly. It wasn't even harmful. It was humiliating. A scarlet letter in cocktail form, and guess who would be drinking it? When I slipped into bed that night, my fiancé was already asleep, blissfully unaware that his future wife was orchestrating a small-scale psychological war. He dreamed of vows and honeymoons. I dreamed of my best friend hoisted by her own poison, pink-lipped and gasping for excuses while the photographer's flash burned her lies into permanence. The morning of the wedding, my stomach didn't twist with nerves. It hummed with anticipation. The dress hung like armor. The veil was a curtain for the final act. My smile, polished in the mirror, was both bride and executioner. She arrived early, of course, full of compliments, too sugary to be anything but saccharine poison. "You look radiant," she cooed, eyes sharp as glass. Like a goddess. And maybe I did. Not because of the dress, but because nothing shines brighter than a woman who knows the script and holds all the props. By the time we left for the ceremony, the stage was set. The champagne was guarded. The decoys were planted. The trap was baited. She thought she was the mastermind. But in reality, she was just the opening act. The morning of my wedding felt less like a fairy tale and more like opening night at a Broadway show. I wasn't a blushing bride. I was the lead actress in a production where every bouquet, boutonniere, and bow was a prop. The aisle was my stage. The guests were my unwitting audience. And the woman standing beside me, my so-called best friend, wasn't the maid of honor she pretended to be. She was my antagonist, sharpening her teeth behind a layer of blush and perfume. She floated around the bridal suite like a hummingbird drunk on nectar, adjusting my veil, patting my arm, whispering, "You've got this," with the same tone people use to tell a child their drawing is good when it looks like roadkill. She kept holding my clutch, the decoy one stuffed with glitter, and I let her. It was almost tender, the way she clung to her illusion of control, like watching a cat need a pillow before realizing it's about to be vacuumed. When it was time to line up, she smirked at me with a smile so rehearsed it belonged in a toothpaste commercial. "Ready, babe?" she asked. "Always," I said. And oh, I was. The ceremony itself was sickeningly beautiful. Rows of roses, candles flickering like obedient soldiers, music swelling at just the right moment. My fiancé's eyes glistened like something out of a romance film. He mouthed, "You look perfect," and for one blissful second, I almost forgot the war I was waging. Almost, but then I caught her watching me, not with affection, but with calculation. Her gaze wasn't on my happiness, it was on timing. She scanned the champagne tower like a thief eyeing jewelry. Her hands twitched when the caterers brought trays of hors d'oeuvres past her. If evil could glow, she'd have lit the room brighter than the chandeliers. When the vows ended and the kiss sealed the deal, the applause thundered like a victory drum. But victory hadn't been claimed yet. Not mine, not hers. The battlefield was only just opening. At the reception, the sabotage attempts began small. A glass of water appeared at my side, courtesy of her thoughtfulness. I lifted it, pretending not to notice the faint, unfamiliar herbal smell. A cousin clinked a spoon against a glass to make us kiss, and in the commotion, I set the glass down on the wrong tray. Or rather, the right one. By the time she realized, the bartender had whisked it away, lips sealed tighter than a bank vault. Strike one. Next, she hovered near the dessert station, eyes darting like a spy at a border crossing. She leaned close to the cake, whispering something to the baker's assistant, who promptly laughed in her face. I had briefed them all. "Oh, she just wanted to check the flavor," the assistant said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. The guests laughed too, assuming it was harmless. But I caught the flicker of irritation on her face. Strike two. She grew bolder after that. During the bouquet toss, she tried to slip something into my clutch while pretending to fix the strap. The photographer's assistant was right there, snapping candids. Flash after flash, evidence disguised as bridal memories. Later, when she tried to retrieve whatever she had planted, she found only glitter and a tiny wind-up toy I'd hidden for fun. She forced a laugh, but her hand trembled like a marionette with frayed strings. Strike three. By then, I knew I had her. She was unraveling, threads of composure slipping with every failed attempt. Villains always reveal themselves not in triumph, but in desperation. and desperation looks ugly under ballroom lighting. The crescendo came with the champagne. Oh, the champagne. That glittering tower of glass pyramids, glistening like a monument to indulgence. She insisted on helping the staff pour. Of course she did. She hovered with the grace of a volunteer firefighter carrying gasoline. But the bartender, my silent sentinel, never took his eyes off her. Every flute placed in my hand was pristine, poured directly from bottles stored behind him. She knew it. She hated it. And the more her frustration grew, the more reckless her performance became. At one point, she accidentally knocked a glass into my path, shattering it across the floor. The crowd gasped. She gasped too, all wide-eyed innocence. "Oops, babe, I'm so clumsy." I bent down, smiling sweetly, and whispered so only she could hear, "Don't worry, I'm keeping track." Her smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. The music swelled, guests twirled on the dance floor, and all the while she stalked me, looking for one last chance. The decoys were working beautifully. Every failed attempt tightened the noose she didn't know was already around her neck. And then came the toast lineup, the grand finale of Act 1. My father spoke first, his words trembling with pride. My maid of honor, the saboteur in silk, was next in line. She grabbed her flute, lifted it high, and began her performance. She spoke about friendship, about the bond we've shared since childhood. Her words dripped honey, but her eyes were daggers. She raised the glass to her lips, savoring the attention, savoring the illusion of control. And that was when I saw it, the faint pink stain blooming on her lips. Not from lipstick, from the tamper-sealed cordial she had believed was her masterpiece. She didn't know it, but she was already marked. My photographer's assistant angled the lens. Flash, flash, flash. Her smile froze mid-sip. I raised my glass, still untouched, and prepared for my turn. The room hushed, ready for my words. She glanced at me, panicked for the briefest flicker of a second, and in that flicker, I knew the trap had sprung. When it was finally my turn to lift the glass, I felt the hush settle over the room like a velvet curtain. Every guest leaned in, expecting a bride's heartfelt gratitude, a trembling voice, maybe even a tear. What they got instead was me, smiling like a cat that had swallowed not just the canary but the entire aviary. "First of all," I began, my voice sweet as frosting, "thank you all for being here to witness the happiest day of my life." I let my eyes sweep over the room, pausing just long enough on her face, the maid of dishonor, that she shifted in her seat. Her smile looked painted on with a shaky hand. I continued, "Marriage is about trust, about knowing that someone always has your back, even if sometimes they accidentally aim for it with a knife." Laughter rippled through the guests, nervous, uncertain laughter. I raised my glass higher. And friendship? Well, friendship is about sharing everything, even drinks. The pink on her lips deepened, blossoming like a stain on a white dress. My photographer's assistant caught every angle, flash, flash, evidence disguised as candids. She dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, but the tint clung stubbornly, announcing itself louder than her rehearsed smile. I let the silence stretch, savoring it like a fine wine. Then I dropped the line I'd been practicing at 2 a.m. for weeks, to love, to loyalty, and to the sweet irony of people who fall victim to their own plans. The room erupted in laughter, thinking I was being witty. Only she knew the weight behind the words. Her hand tightened around the flute, her knuckles pale, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. She tried to recover, of course. Leaned toward me, whispered with a hiss, "What did you do?" I didn't even turn my head. I just smiled at the crowd and said louder, "Oh, nothing at all. Just letting the evening play out naturally." The guests clapped again, clueless. She sank back into her chair, lips blooming brighter with each nervous sip she pretended was intentional. And here's the thing about poison, or in this case, the absence of it. It's never the chemical that destroys you. It's the belief. She had planned to make me paranoid, to ruin my night with one sip of fear. Instead, she sat there swallowing her own performance, convinced every flutter in her chest was her masterpiece backfiring. The irony tasted better than cake. By the time the dancing started, Whispers had begun. People noticed her complexion turning blotchy, her hands trembling, her eyes glassy with panic. She tried to play it off, laughing too loudly, clapping off beat, but gossip spreads faster than spilled champagne. "Is she okay?" one aunt whispered. "Maybe she's had too much," another replied. Perfect cover, perfect humiliation. She excused herself halfway through the first dance, stumbling toward the restroom, clutching her stomach like a melodramatic soap opera star. I let her go. What's better than a villain unraveling in front of a crowd? A villain unraveling alone, haunted by the possibility that she's been caught. The planner followed discreetly, just to make sure she didn't pull any last-minute theatrics. By the time she returned, her lipstick smeared, her hair frizzed, her face pale, she looked less like a maid of honor and more like the ghost of bad decisions. And then, as if scripted by fate itself, the DJ called for one more round of toasts. She tried to refuse, but the crowd pushed. "Say something funny," they urged. "You're the life of the party." So she stood, trembling, raising her glass again. The pink stain on her lips glowed under the spotlight. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was a strangled laugh. "To friendship," she croaked. Silence. Awkward, heavy silence. I rose, swooping in like a swan covering her ugly duckling. "Yes," I said, rescuing the moment. "To friendship. Messy, complicated, but always revealing the truth in the end." My glass touched hers with a gentle clink, and she flinched like it was a gunshot. The guests cheered. Cameras flashed. And she sat back down, defeated, her shoulders caving as though the dress itself weighed 100 pounds. From that moment on, she was a ghost at my wedding. She hovered at the edges, her smile gone, her confidence shattered. People avoided her, sensing something rotten beneath the perfume. The irony was delicious. She'd spent months plotting to make me look weak, paranoid, foolish. Instead, she became the spectacle, the whispered story that would live on long after the cake was gone. And me, I danced, I laughed. I glowed like the star of the show I'd always meant to be. Because weddings aren't about perfection. They're about survival, about making it through the storm and still smiling for the camera. As the night wound down, I spotted her one last time, slumped in a corner chair, clutching an untouched slice of cake. She caught my eye, and for a split second, the mask dropped. Fury, shame, fear, all tangled together. I raised my glass again just for her, a private toast across the room. "Here's to you," I thought, to the disposable fork that snapped under pressure, and then I turned back to my guests, laughing as though nothing had ever been wrong. By the time midnight crept in, the ballroom looked like a battlefield dressed in satin. Guests were swaying on the dance floor, shoes abandoned under tables, ties loosened, mascara streaked. The cake had been reduced to crumbs, the champagne to empty flutes. The only thing left intact was my smile, sharp, deliberate, carved into my face like a crown I refused to remove. She, on the other hand, was unraveling faster than a bargain bin veil. My so-called best friend sat hunched at her table, lips stained a humiliating pink, hands trembling around her glass as if gripping it kept her tethered to reality. Every time someone glanced her way, she forced a laugh too loud, too jagged, the sound of glass cracking under pressure. People whispered, people noticed. Her plan hadn't just failed, it had boomeranged and smacked her square in the teeth. But I wasn't done. No, I had one last performance, the toast that would seal everything in irony, a final bow before the curtain closed on her little tragedy. The DJ dimmed the lights, signaling the last round of speeches. Guests gathered, tipsy and sentimental, ready for tearful farewells and sloppy declarations of eternal love. My new husband raised his glass and thanked everyone for being part of the best day of our lives. Sweet, safe, predictable. Then all eyes turned to me. I rose slowly, savoring the silence, the anticipation. My veil shimmered faintly in the low light. I lifted my glass, letting the chandelier catch it, the liquid inside glowing like liquid gold. "Tonight," I began, my voice ringing clear, "we celebrated love, commitment, partnership, all those beautiful words that make you believe life can be tied neatly with a ribbon, murmurs of agreement, nods, smiles. Perfect. I let the sweetness linger a beat too long, then shifted. But we've also celebrated something else. Survival. A ripple moved through the crowd. My smile sharpened. Yes, I continued, because weddings, like life, aren't just about finding someone to love. They're about navigating everything and everyone that tries to destroy that love. Sometimes it's circumstances, sometimes it's stress, and sometimes I let my gaze land squarely on her. It's people who call themselves friends. Gasps. Nervous chuckles. All eyes followed mine. She froze, pink lips trembling, caught like a deer in headlights. Friendship, I went on, lifting my glass higher, is supposed to be about trust, support, sharing joy. But sometimes friendship is about watching someone reveal themselves, sip by sip, mistake by mistake, until the truth stains their lips for everyone to see. The room erupted in laughter, clapping, cheering. They thought it was just a clever metaphor, a joke about too much champagne. Only she and I knew the punchline. Her chair scraped as she shifted, desperate to shrink into the wallpaper. I kept going, relentless. So tonight I toast not just to love, but to irony, to poetic justice, to those who dig graves for others, only to find themselves at the bottom. May your glass always be full of your own medicine. The applause thundered, echoing through the hall like a victory drum. Guests clinked glasses, laughing, repeating lines back to each other. Poetic justice, her own medicine. They loved it. They adored me. And she? She sat silent, her face blotchy, her lips screaming louder than any words could. I drank, slowly, deliberately, letting her watch me savor the sip she had planned to be my undoing. And in that moment, I knew the war was won. Not because she was exposed in some dramatic confession, not because she collapsed or cried or confessed. No. The victory was quieter, sharper. She was destroyed by the weight of her own paranoia, undone by her belief in her brilliance. She had poisoned herself long before she ever touched a bottle. As the night wound down, guests left in waves of hugs and laughter. My husband kissed my cheek, whispering how proud he was of my strength, how radiant I looked, how perfect the day had been. He didn't know the half of it. When the last song faded and the lights dimmed, I turned once more toward her. She hadn't moved from her chair, eyes vacant, lips still stained. Our gazes met. I lifted my empty flute, a final toast just for her, my voice soft enough for only her to hear. Here's to you, I said, my best friend, my almost executioner, and now my favorite ghost. She flinched, then looked away, shrinking into her own silence. I walked out of that ballroom on the arm of my husband, veil trailing behind me like a victory banner. Outside, the night air was cool, the stars indifferent witnesses to the comedy and tragedy inside. And me? I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Because weddings aren't about innocence, they're about survival. And I survived by turning my would-be saboteur into the evening's entertainment. As the car pulled away, I glanced back one last time, the ballroom lights glowing in the distance. Cheers, I whispered, and I swear somewhere in the shadows I heard the sound of a fork snapping.